Zack Snyder's 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead is often considered to be a modern zombie classic. Its action-packed, adrenaline-filled opening and climax, along with its memorable cast, have cemented the film's status as a must-watch for any fan of the zombie genre. That being said, one of the most common complaints about Snyder's undead epic revolves around the cast's decision to abandon the mall. In the eyes of many, including my fellow content creators, the decision to leave the safety of the Crossroads Mall was a stupid decision which was not based on any real inciting incident. Given this commonplace sentiment, I've decided to think about how the story would have logically unfolded had the Milwaukee survivors stayed at the mall. Let's begin with the initial inciting incident within the canon timeline of the movie. Everyone is chilling in the mall's cafeteria when Kenneth gives his speech about not wanting to die at the mall. The survivors hear him out, but eventually Steve the Prick and CJ manage to explain to everyone just how stupid it would be to leave the mall. That's right, in this alternate timeline, CJ decides to not ignore his rational thinking and gut, instead of just saying, "Fuck it, YOLO bitch." As a direct result of Kenneth being rejected, everyone comes to the shocking realization that they've been at the mall for nearly an entire month. This causes our cast of wacky survivors to begin brainstorming on how to make the Crossroads Mall a more sustainable safe haven. While this much-needed brainstorming session takes place, Kenneth would head to the rooftop of the mall, just to clear his mind. He still doesn't really want to stay at the mall, and you know what, he's really itching to leave. As he stares off into the middle distance, taking note of the ever-increasing horde of undead freaks, he then glances over to Andy's gun shop. This is when he realizes the man is probably gonna run out of food and water at some point. If he can't leave the mall, maybe he can at least save his new buddy from starvation. After this sudden realization, Kenneth immediately rushes back downstairs, only to find the survivors still debating how to improve the mall's sustainability. It's clear that there's enough non-perishable foods to last at least a year, and that there's plenty of perishable foods which are still being refrigerated. Tucker brings up the idea of potentially crafting makeshift bird traps for additional food accumulation, and Michael manages to convince everyone of the importance of building a rain collection system of some sort. But not a single member recognizes one glaring issue, being that of the mall's backup generators. Everyone believes the generators have enough fuel to last at least 2 years, based on CJ and Terry's estimations, which is likely true by the way. But what everyone overlooks is the fact that said generators will eventually break down, after continued use, without some form of maintenance being performed. Maintenance that none of them is capable of providing. Be that as it may, Kenneth manages to get everyone's attention again. He then goes on to inform everyone about Andy's precarious state of affairs, arguing that he ought to be saved. Kenneth also then argues that the group should aim to bring as many guns and ammunition as humanly possible back to the mall when rescuing Andy. These weapons could very well ensure the survival and safety of their new home. And this is when everyone starts to debate over what sort of plan is needed to rescue Andy. Eventually, everyone agrees on a simple plan, being to drive the semi-truck located outside of the mall by the loading bay, and to have said truck draw the undead away from Andy's shop. Then a rescue team will approach the shop via the sewers, before entering the shop and grabbing Andy and the guns, before then returning back to the sewers and back to the mall. Once the plan is finalized, Kenneth gets the information to Andy via their little rooftop whiteboard communication system, and just a day later, the operation is conducted. But just like the original timeline, a small horde manages to chase our group down the sewers and up the staircase in the mall. Luckily, this time Anna is there to open the door immediately, since she won't be in the garage working on some armored bus. That being said, the group would likely still lose Tucker or maybe Terry. But it's possible that no one dies, despite the operation's hiccups due in part to the horde being much smaller, all thanks to the truck diverting most of the undead away from the gun shop. Regardless of the overall outcome, the rescue mission would largely be considered a success. Andy was saved, and now the mall is stocked on guns and ammunition. As Andy gets acclimated to his new living quarters, it's explained to him that everyone intends on staying at the mall until the apocalypse eventually ends, at which point Andy, a prepping enthusiast, inquires about the feasibility of such a plan. As it turns out, there's no farming goods store in the mall, and Andy seems to be the only motherfucker bothered by this. He explains to the group that without a sustainable, renewable food source of some sort, the mall will eventually run out of food. Bird traps will not be enough to feed all of the mouths at that safe haven, and those generators will eventually break down. He also goes on to explain that he doesn't have enough ammunition and guns to clear the undead, which is something he already tried. Michael interjects, positing that perhaps the undead will freeze during the peak winter season. After all, the average temperature in Milwaukee during the coldest winter month, being January, is roughly 28 degrees Fahrenheit to 16 degrees Fahrenheit. Andy agrees that this might be a possibility, but he doubts it, especially given that he tossed a Molotov at the undead and it didn't do shit to them. As time passes, days turn to weeks and weeks turn to months. The group slowly fortifies the mall while building a shit ton of bird and rodent traps. A primitive rainwater collection system is also built on the rooftop. But as temperatures begin to drop, the backup generators in the mall are forced to work harder and harder, until one day they break down from extended use. This pretty much destroys the mall's food preservation, leaving only the non-perishable foods left for our survivors. This also occurs just before the start of winter in late November. There's less rainfall, less birds, and the undead seem unbothered by the cold. The group eventually resorts to burning unnecessary materials and furniture to keep them all warm, as the winter fully gets into motion in December. Snow is melted and boiled into potable water, and the few birds they manage to catch during the winter season are preserved on the rooftop, using the snow and cold air as their own refrigeration system. The few non-perishables they do have are rationed. And yes, Steve is thrown into a detainment cell when he inevitably ignores the rationing mandate. As time goes on, our survivors get weaker and weaker. Many begin to suffer from cabin fever. A few take turns camping outside on the rooftop just to get some fresh air. But the undead remain mobile, seemingly unaffected by the harsh winter elements, thus confirming everyone's worst fears. The undead are supernatural. Now, obviously this is just speculation. The story could likely include freezing zombies, but given how the movie overtly implies that this simultaneous global outbreak is supernatural, I figured I'd just run with it. It sure as hell wouldn't be the first time zombies are unaffected by cold weather.
Oh, but Captain Gold, that's unrealistic.
Yeah, so are sprinting undead zombies, which are seemingly unaffected by decomposition after 1 month of being exposed to the elements in the original canon timeline of the movie. So please,
shut the fuck up, you stupid nerd.
Sorry about that. Where was I? Oh, right. Everyone now knows the undead do not freeze, and they also know staying at the mall isn't exactly feasible in the long run. They still have enough to survive for a few months, but it won't last forever, which eventually causes our cast to reconsider Kenneth's plan to vacate the mall, which, spoiler alert, eventually leads to the ending we got in the canon timeline. No matter what happened, our group of survivors were destined to die either at the mall or during an escape attempt. The only realistic time for them to escape was during the early stages of the apocalypse. They missed their window of opportunity and, as such, were condemned to eventually die. The only way this outcome changes is if and only if the undead freeze during the winter. But even then, it's highly unlikely that the group manages to survive a harsh winter on the road or on an island. These people just aren't equipped for such a challenge. And if they travel south, they just run into hordes of the undead which aren't frozen. Hell, they might not even be able to operate vehicles at this point in the story. The diesel used for the buses might have gelled in the cold temperature. Car batteries tend to drain quickly in extreme cold as well. Condensation and ice may have built up in the fuel lines, clogging everything up. Simply put, these survivors are largely cooked. I mean, it's possible that some may survive in the long run, after vacating the mall, but this idea that they could just stay indefinitely is just not one which is based on reality, or on the actual skill sets of the cast. But it sure as hell beats being eaten alive, I'll give you that. Anyways, if you like this sort of content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Click the damn bell as well if you'd like to be notified when I publish a new video. And remember that you may opine anytime if you feel so inclined, down in the comments section. I'm Captain Gold, and I hope to see you in my next Gold Standard video.